Bergen County. I'll break the ice here, guys.
I didn't know which Matt was going to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna help myself. You're muted, Matthew.
Sometimes we step on each other's lines. Certainly, if I'm muted, you don't have to worry about that. But it's nice to see a lot of folks coming in. And as you're coming in, give you a welcome from Northern Valley on behalf of Northern Valley. But we hope we have some folks joining us from some of our local schools, our colleagues, our neighbors. And both Peg and Matt have presented before on the ins and outs of a lot of financial considerations. They're experts in not just this area, but the comprehensive college admissions as well. So it's good to know that we have some professional colleagues that we can invite and speak to our families. Very quickly for Northern Valley, we hold a couple of these a year. We have at least one in the fall and one in the spring, sometimes more if we can. We also have resources to the best we can. We present and offer to you in our comprehensive college information document, as well as the senior website that we have. More than that, we do try to offer some local scholarship information, national scholarship information, as well as some other resources for financial aid. We want our families to feel as well informed as they can. This happens to be an area within an area of stress within an area of stress. So college admissions brings us some stress naturally, and finances always do. And I think I don't have to share with you what are we most anxious about. Among those things include money, right? So that's a reality in our life. We all believe in college, and we want to see, is there a way we can afford it and have our students not start their life out in debt, or at least manageable debt. So we've been really thankful over the years for what these folks can share with our family. So we welcome them. We'll turn the mic over to them, and I'll join later if there's a need for me to share in Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. And a perfect intro too, right? We say it every day internally, probably more than once. No kidding, you're freaked out. It's your kids and your money. So those are two pretty powerful, pain points potentially, or points of anxiety, whatever. And our deal, what we do, and Peg and I collectively, combined, approaching 40 years here, is try to educate folks, right? The more you understand, the less fear of the unknown. And some of these things are scary, are hard to hear. $90,000 a year for college now, right? Pretty freaky. And they're going to count my home equity against me and my business, maybe. I mean, we'll talk about these things, but our goal is that you understand how this works, and then more specifically, how it's going to work for your family. What can you control versus not control? And, the real hope is that you leave here tonight at least having some of the most important questions answered, and kind of a go forward plan, right? And something you'll hear us say at the end, and just throughout, if you decide to interface with us at all beyond tonight, is just continue to pay attention. This is all we do all day, every day, is to try to educate families on the best way that they can navigate this process and maximize their odds of having really successful outcomes, right? And Matthew said it too, but regardless of your financial situation, whether you're eligible for aid, not eligible for aid, really bright kid or middle of the pack kid, whatever, everybody's got an affordable path to college. It's just a little bit challenging to figure out what's yours, right? And that's what we're trying to show folks. So that's kind of that's the good news, right? And that's what I think is like, I'm hoping it's more optimism, because I promise you there is a way to do this in such a way that parents get to retire someday. The kid doesn't take on this crushing amount of debt, and still goes and has an amazing college experience and graduates with great opportunities and all the things that we love about college. So my name's Matt Carpenter. We're College Aid Pro. I'm checking in. I used to be on premise back in the day, on premise in your beautiful high schools down there in Bergen County. Obviously, we've been virtual for a while now. I'm just north of Boston in Salem, Mass. And Peg, this is a Jersey girl right here. Okay, even though she's checking in from Seattle, I promise this is New Providence's own here. Peg Keough, who I like to call the fairy godmother of financial aid, and I bring in the big guns when we come down to Bergen County. So, Peg, why don't you say hello and go over our housekeeping stuff, and then we'll dive into the content.
Yeah. So I'm Peg Keough. My background is in like financial planning and asset management, and I have twins. I'm sure there's some people with twins on here. So when my kids hit high school, kind of started thinking about how does this all work? Just like Matt was talking about, like we had been saving through the years, and I was just blown away at how stressful and complicated it was. And that's when I decided to just focus on this. And so that's what I do now. I just focus on helping families just like you. And as Matt said, it's your money and it's your kids. So it's a really kind of perfect storm of emotions. But the more you understand and the more you're an informed consumer in this process, you are so far ahead of the game, and you'll know the questions to ask, and you'll understand financially, but then even more importantly, where you fit. And it's different with different kids and different colleges. So that's what we're here to do, to kind of pull the curtain away and kind of give you the straight scoop of how all this works, because there's a lot of information out there. So a couple housekeeping things. We love questions. So we've already had a couple in the Q&A. Put them in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. Then we just have one place to look. When one of us is presenting, the other one's going to be answering. So put them in the Q&A. We'll remind you if you forget, and you can also be anonymous if you choose to be. And we will send out the recording tomorrow. So you will get the recording. So if you get interrupted or you have to leave midway, don't worry about it. You will get the recording tomorrow. So you'll be all set. All right, well, let's kick this off. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. And so for people, that I think most of you are probably new, this truly is our mission, and tied to what both Matt and I have said, to end the student debt crisis by empowering families, to shop smarter for college. And the way that happens is having the knowledge and the understanding. So there we are. So let's just talk about, I was going to jump into my first slide, but I will do this one first. Everybody should have gotten an email this morning encouraging you to set up your free account, your free CAP account. So if you did that, great. Have it open to the side, because when we're talking about and teaching you about student aid indexes, and with a sample family, you can actually be looking at yours, which is pretty powerful, and you can start to figure out where you fit, like I was saying. So have that open. If you haven't done it yet, Matt will pop this link on the slide in the chat. Go ahead, just go in there, click get started for free, make up a username and password. There's a few onboarding questions, and then you'll be on your dashboard. And what's really nice about this is some of you might have shown up tonight thinking, I'm not eligible for need-based aid. I got to learn about something else. This will tell you right away, even if you don't understand what you're looking at. If you already set it up, we're going to dive in there in a few minutes, and we're going to make it all clear. And it's going to help you, like I said, start to pull that curtain away and understand your family. So strongly recommend that you get that done if you haven't done it yet. Okay. So now let's just talk about financial aid. The first thing that's kind of counterintuitive, we've all seen the sticker price, the cost of attendance for college, go up and up and up. I mean, it's been doing it for decades. So cost of attendance is the tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, it's all of it together. But the key thing is it's really irrelevant, because all the colleges are discounting. They're all on sale. It's just a matter of how they're on sale. And they discount their price in these three different ways that you see on the slide. And it's not one of three of them. It could be all of them for a given family, or maybe just one for a given family. It just depends. So the first bucket on the left are called need-based grants. So as the name kind of hints, this is money mostly from college endowments. You have to have financial need, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The college gives you these grants, usually called grants, from their endowment. The federal government can give you a Pell Grant, and states can give you a grant. But by far, the college endowments are the biggest source of these need-based grants. If you don't have need-based eligibility, the second bucket's going to be pretty important if you don't want to pay full price. And those are merit-based scholarships. So it's the flip side. It's not based on your ability to pay and your assets and your income. It's based on your child, their grades and test scores typically, or maybe just grades with all these test optional schools, or talents, playing the violin, sports, whatever that happens to be. That's based on the student. Bill Gates's kids can get merit-based scholarships. It doesn't matter how much money you have. And then that third bucket we call self-help. And that's because it's not free money. Okay. It's not bad. It just either you have to work for it in the form of work study, government pays half the wage, and your child actually goes and does a job for 10 hours a week and gets a paycheck. And then they use that to pay for college expenses, or loans. And again, loans, yeah, in an ideal world, nobody has loans. In an ideal world, we all just buy our house, right? But that's just not the way it works. But, prudent amount of loans. And that's a topic of a whole nother webinar. But that's the third bucket. Obviously not free money, but it's a part of a lot of families' college funding strategy. Okay, so now you're probably thinking, okay, I set up my account, I don't totally get it, or I haven't set it up yet. How do I know if I'm eligible for need-based aid? So there's a pretty simple formula that the colleges use, and you see it right here. Cost of attendance minus SAI, which stands for Student Aid Index. And what that is that's what the colleges they think you as a family can afford to pay for 1 year of school. It doesn't mean that's all you're going to pay, but that's what they think you can afford. Most parents literally fall off their chair when they see this number, because they're like, are you kidding? Is this for 4 years? I can't pay this every year. But you've got to know this number. Like, that's the beginning. And sometimes there's strategies to lower it. But honestly, if you make a decent living, you're not going to quit your job, right? So some of it is what it is. So they take that sticker price that I just talked about, they subtract the student aid index, and that's your need. So if a school costs, Matt said earlier, and he wasn't kidding, there's some schools that are over 90,000 all in. If it's 90,000, you have an SAI of 100,000. Obviously, you do the difference. You don't have any need-based eligibility. Okay. School costs 50. You have an SAI of 20. Now you have $30,000 of need. It doesn't mean the school's going to swoop in and give you $30,000. Some will. Some might give you a little work study, and they'll give you all those need-based grants that I just talked about. That's where all the craziness comes in. The colleges don't all function in the same way. And that's what we're here to help you understand. So let's talk about what makes up this student aid index. The way that they calculate it is by you submitting financial aid forms. And we're going to get into the weeds on those in a few minutes. We recommend almost all families submit financial aid forms. Obviously, there's no SAI if there's no financial aid forms. And just by the way, we're going to talk about some FAFSA changes at the end. Matt's going to touch on them. If you're familiar with the term expected family contribution, if you have older kids, EFC, it's the calculations in the background are a little different, and we're going to talk about that, but think of it in the same way as the EFC. The government replaced the name, and we're now calling it a student aid index. So in case you're wondering, maybe that helps. Okay, so let's talk about this SAI and how it's calculated. There's two main parts. There's assets, and that's going to be parent and student, and income, parents and student. So as far as the assets are concerned, everything is on the table except for retirement assets and your primary home for the FAFSA. On the other form, your primary home is going to be on the table, and we'll talk about that. When I say primary home, I mean the home you live in. If you have other real estate, that's on the table. So if you have really nice balances in 401ks and Roth IRAs and a 403b, if you're a teacher, awesome. The financial planner in me is very happy that you're getting ready for retirement, and those balances are not included on the form. But as I said, all the other assets are. So if you have stocks and bonds, checking and savings, CDs, anything like that, that's on the table, as well as 529. So let's take a minute and talk about college savings accounts, because a lot of people have them. It's a super common question. So if the parent that's submitting the FAFSA is the owner, and typically parents are the owner or grandparent or somebody else, not the kids. The kids are the beneficiary. So it's considered an asset of the owner. So if the parent is the owner, that's an asset of the parents. And we're going to do line by line soon of these forms. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make. And I understand it, because you think, oh, that's an account for my child, so I'm going to put it under their assets. Well, that shoots up your SAI, because parent assets are assessed up to a little shy of 6%, whereas student assets are 20 or 25. So you don't want to make that mistake. So parent-owned 529s are an asset of the parent. Anybody else that owns a 529, grandma, super common, grandma, grandpa, your brother who never had kids and wants to help you with yours, those people aren't submitting the FAFSA. That balance in that account is not included. Also, if you have been a great saver and you have 3 kids and you have 50,000 in each 529, that 100,000 in your younger 2 kids, or older and younger, whatever it is, that isn't disclosed when they ask about your assets. That's a new change, okay? If you have UGMAs or UTMAs, and if you do, that will ring a bell. If you don't stress about it. It means you just don't have them. It's all good. Those are considered an asset of the student, but there are strategies to move it into the parent's name. That would be something you'd want to get some support from us on, get some professional help to see if you should even do it and what the ramifications are. If you have jointly owned accounts with your kids, that's considered an asset of yours. If your child has worked and has amassed $10,000, say, and it's all in their name, depending on your situation and what your SAI is, you might want to move that over to your name, not to take it from your kids, right? But just to change it so when you submit the forms, you're being honest, and you can say that's an asset of yours. So there's some nuances there. Assets are assessed the day you hit submit. So you have time, if you have a senior, these forms aren't, well, the FAFSA isn't going to go live till later this year. You have time before you submit to, spend money you're going to spend or whatever that happens to be. And I mentioned real estate. So your primary home on the FAFSA is off the table. Your equity, which means your market value minus any liabilities, HELOC, regular mortgage, whatever it is off the table. But there is another form that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes called the CSS profile. They do ask about the home you live in. So the main thing is you don't want to overvalue your home. You want to be honest. You always want to be honest, but you want to find the lowest defensible, I got to sell my home yesterday price. And then you can deduct about 20%. It's something called the IRS quick sale value. As we all know, if you've sold a home, you're not going to realize all that money. In the state of Washington, we have to pay sales tax when we sell our home. And there's other, realtors and closing costs and the whole bit. So just planting that seed, and we'll touch on that a little bit in a few minutes. So that's, yeah.
Sorry if you hit on this. Maybe I was answering some questions, so maybe you did and I just didn't hear it. But we got a couple of questions on what if we have a savings account that's a joint savings account? What do you recommend? What are our options there? Why does it matter?
Yeah, and I did touch on this, but I'll say it again in case people didn't hear. If you have a jointly owned account and you're on it with your child, it's an asset of yours. And as I said at the beginning, if it's a bigger account, that can move the needle on the SAI calculation, because kids' assets are either 20 or 25% versus a little shy of 6% as far as how it gets calculated. So you want to, if you're a need-based eligible family, you want to keep money out of your kid's name. That's why I was saying with the UGMAs and UTMAs, there's strategies to move it into the parent's name, but you really need to talk to us before you do that. It might not be needed, and there are tax ramifications and other things. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So that's the asset piece. The other side of it is income. So student income, parental income. It's a 2-year look back. So the opposite of assets that are literally real time. You could look at your portfolio before you hit submit at the close of business on a given day. It's a 2-year look back. President Obama put this into place called prior year. So you see the years on the slide here. If you have a senior, when you're doing these forms, it's going to all be about 2022. junior, 2023, and so on. So you filed your return, it is what it is. It's mostly based on line 11, which is your adjusted gross income. There are some other add backs, but that's the primary driver of this calculation. Now for students, there's an income protection allowance for parents and students. For the parents, it's pretty meager, but for the students, it's pretty good. You see what's up here now. This is the current income allowance for kids. So over $9,400. So what that means is if your child made $8,000 in 2022, it's a wash. It's just complete. It's not part of the equation, and they could make that money and it doesn't affect the calculation. So for most kids, they're not going to make more than $9,400. Parental income is really the biggest driver of this calculation. As I said earlier, I've had a few parents that are like, oh, I want to walk the Pacific Crest Trail. Maybe I'll quit my job. But most people aren't doing that for obvious reasons, right? So I'm here to tell you, if you make a nice living, it's a good thing overall. And financial aid, it might sting a little, but ways to get around it and still get money, which leads me very nicely to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Matt. So if you're looking at your dashboard and you're like, oh, great, my SAIs are high, I'm learning now I don't have need-based eligibility, then what do you do? So you remember that middle bucket that I talked about. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt to continue.
Division one segue there, Peggy.
I know, I killed it. I haven't done that one before.
Look,
guys, remember, please put your questions in the Q&A. I just paste it over to the Q&A for me, because I see there are a bunch.
Here comes the Jersey girl. Don't get her going, guys. Put those in the Q&A or else. Look at I think an especially frustrating part of this process calculation kind of system as a whole, especially where we live, Boston area, North Jersey, even more so, New York City, out where Peggy is, and the Seattle area, Bay Area, right? These areas of the country, the calculation really doesn't account for cost of living. Okay, technically the formula, the Department of Education would defend it and say, yes, we do, right? But it's not actually, right? It's not actually to move the needle. It doesn't actually move the needle. You know, for all intents and purposes, they're looking at a household income of 150,000, family of 4 in Bergen County, the same way they are in the middle of nowhere in rural Iowa, right? And we know that you guys know specifically with the taxes you pay and everything else that I won't bore you with. I'm sure you talk about all the time. It's not baked in there enough. So I'm just kind of setting that expectation that it's one of the many things that aren't just, you know, quite frankly, aren't just very fair in this system. So as some of you are looking at your SAI right now within your platform going, this can't be right. However, to Peg's point, let's talk about some things that we can do to save ourselves some money, to get some meaningful discounts that does not come under this need-based financial aid umbrella. Peg just did a great job and spent a fair amount of time going over need-based financial aid because it's more complex and there's more things to talk through. And truthfully, she probably just hit on kind of the tip of the iceberg. But again, we only have so much information and so much time that we can pack into one night. But I do want to spend some time making sure that we understand what our options are if we aren't eligible. And the biggest one is scholarships, right? Merit-based scholarships. Who's going to give my kid money regardless of our family's financial situation? Now, when I used to come and do this in person, I swear on this slide, I would see half of the room kind of gloss over. And I know what they're thinking is go look at their phone, right? Of like, my kid's middle of the pack. They're a C student. We're not one of these brilliant kids. We're not going to get merit-based scholarships, right? That's one of the biggest myths out there. I promise you, I don't care where your kid falls on a spectrum. I'd be able to show you tons of colleges that would give a meaningful amount of merit-based scholarships. Okay, now obviously the name of the game is to align those with schools that they are equally attracted to. But I just want to make sure that you're not kind of shutting off, even if your kid is not as, and I know how talented the kids are, in your neck of the woods, but I don't want you to shut off if you feel like your kid is not the star student. couple other things to talk about here. Now we'll go find out in a second where to find, which colleges will give you scholarships and how much and what we think are your best resources there. But a lot of these schools, or at least a meaningful amount of schools, if you even want to be considered for merit-based scholarships, you have to do your FAFSA and or the CSS profile, right? That's not every college, but a lot of families that we work with will say, we're not getting need-based financial aid, and they're right. So we're not going to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Well, at some colleges that disqualifies them from being considered for any scholarships, right? NYU is a perfect example, right? Right in your backyard. I'm sure a ton of your kids are going to be applying to NYU. If you want them to be considered for scholarships, got to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And almost in that same breath, another myth that we run into a lot, just kind of again, that just misinformation, is that every college offers scholarships, right? There's about 100 colleges in which scholarships do not exist. Okay, now Peg and I are fortunate to have on our team the director of financial aid at Harvard, the director of financial aid at MIT, and they will tell you that there's not one kid on their campuses that are there on a scholarship, right? It doesn't matter how brilliant your kid is, what they've done outside the classroom, perfect test scores, valedictorian, and saved a third world country. They're not getting a scholarship to any of the Ivy League colleges. They're not getting a scholarship to Amherst or Williams, these types of schools. So that's something else that we want to make sure that families understand, especially if you have this really talented kid and you don't think you're going to be eligible for need-based financial aid, but you're still concerned about the price point. I'm not saying don't apply to those schools. We never say that. Apply to them, throw your hat in the ring, but just know scholarships don't exist there. So we at least want to hedge our bets, right? A huge part of this process is just stacking the odds in our favor and at least hedging our bets and giving us options. And the other one here is just applying to competing colleges. So it's very, very popular, right? I went to a little college up in Boston, maybe some of you heard of, Stonehill College, right? And if at least here locally, and I know still down in your neck of the woods, fair amount of kids apply there, right? Great, awesome little college. And, if I have a kid that knows they only want to go to Stonehill, that's full stop. That's where I want to go. There's not a close second. I'm still going to make them apply to Bentley, or I'm going to make them apply to Providence, even if they hated Bentley and Providence, not because we have any intention whatsoever of going there. We're just going to use that offer from Bentley and or Providence and use it to go back to get more money out of Stonehill. This is something that we do kind of regardless of our family's financial situation, but especially if we're not eligible for need-based aid, this strategy becomes a little bit more important. So Peggy, let me actually share my screen for a second here, and we'll go in and look at a case study or two, and hopefully make this interactive. I see that we woke you guys up. We got the questions coming now, so keep them coming, guys. And this is actually, and Peg said at the beginning, you can ask your questions anonymously too. So this is the opportunity to ask as personal a question. It doesn't matter if it's exactly what we're talking about, whatever. This time is yours. So make sure you're firing at will here. So I saw most of you set up your accounts already here. So this is kind of the source of truth, guys, right? So Peg and I actually did a presentation, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, on just kind of net price calculators in general that colleges have. They're all required to have them, but they're not always that accurate, to put it kindly. Okay, so we really pride ourselves on having the most accurate net price calculator you're going to find. And the first thing that you're going to see staring in your face is your family's SAI, or really SAIs. So to further complicate things, okay, there's actually two different types, broad buckets of SAIs. Most colleges use the federal SAI, which means they only require the FAFSA. If you're a two-household family, they're only looking at one household. They're not looking at home equity or retirement accounts. And they're using that as your foundation for need-based financial aid eligibility. But there's a lot of colleges, and usually we associate them with colleges that require the CSS profile in addition to the FAFSA. I promise we're going to talk about both of these forms in a bit here. But that SAI is different, and oftentimes it can be a lot higher. Not always, but oftentimes it can be a lot higher than the federal SAI. And you see there's a range here, okay, that could be as high as double as the federal SAI. Why is that? Number one, this family owns their primary residence and they have a meaningful amount of equity. So a lot of these colleges that use this methodology are looking at least a percentage of that equity. If you're like Boston College in my backyard, they look at all of it. They're going to say if your home's worth 600 and you owe 200, that's $400,000 in your checking account. As far as we're concerned, is that ridiculous? Of course it is. But that is how they do business. Most of these institutional SAI schools, also, if you are a divorced or separated family, and this household is, right, this is the parents of this student are divorced, 2 households, they're requiring the information from both households, and they're looking at that and they're considering it. Whereas federal SAI schools in these scenarios will only look at one household. So that's why it's pretty common that the SAIs can be different based on the methodology that the college uses. I just told you more than you need to know. But what I want you focused on is kind of where Peg started. And that's the fact that for most families, in most cases, the sticker prices of college are borderline irrelevant. Okay. So we want you to almost ignore these and just be thinking about, well, what are we saying is the net cost at these schools? What are you going to actually pay? And this is a great example where we have Amherst College, BU, NYU. These guys all use the institutional SAI, obviously comparable in the sense that they're really popular, really competitive, awesome, albeit expensive schools. And even though we're sending them the same information, we're going to be expected to pay a different amount at each of these schools. Why? Well, the biggest factor here, excuse me, again, goes back to the fact that these guys have a meaningful amount of home equity. And NYU is looking at just about all of it, and they don't meet 100% of need. So just because you're SAI, you're eligible for a lot of need, it doesn't mean they're going to meet all of it. Whereas BU and Amherst, they both meet a really high percentage of need, but BU looks at some of your home equity while Amherst doesn't. So again, I'm telling you more than you need to know in terms of the nuances and school-specific stuff here. But I just want you guys focused on, well, for the colleges that we're applying to, what are they actually going to cost us? Are we getting a discount? You know, how much, right? This is what I want you, this is what I want you thinking about here. And if you want, just go ahead and put in the chat, right? I know we've been having you focus in the Q&A, but put in the chat some colleges that you guys are thinking about at home. Maybe you know you're going to apply ED to one, or you have a top kind of dream school, or at least maybe it's even your alma mater. Throw a couple colleges in the chat, and we will look at some specific case studies right now and just kind of focus on, you know, how do they do? So here's a really popular one in my backyard now here. So Northeastern, right? And so if we're looking at Northeastern, okay, really expensive, 84 grand. We're going to go there for basically half off, you know, why? So if I click on one of these schools, I can see, okay, well, I'm getting a discount via need-based grants for $41,000. And again, if you want to get further in the weeds, you can say, okay, well, again, why is that? And if I click on this financial aid tab, it'll show me, well, here's the methodology that they use, and here's the percentage of need that they meet, right? And it kind of makes sense given this family situation. Now, we're not showing any merit-based scholarships here. For every college in the country, we have every single scholarship that they offer, the qualifications for each, and we're really good at projecting, well, how much is your kid going to get? And we're not showing any here. But that's because Northeastern's really competitive, right, for merit. So here's the average GPA, here's the average range of test scores, and you know, and specifically, and the percentage of kids that generally get merit, you know, at this school. So again, it kind of makes sense that for this particular student, okay, I understand why they are not, why we're not expecting or projecting them to get any merit. Now, Penn State's an interesting one, right? We are, baby. Unbelievably fun school, great school. Okay. But for a lot of families, specifically that, let's see, the University Park here, that fit into this kind of like mass affluent, upper middle class, it ends up being these types of schools that are the most expensive schools, right? They're out of state schools. So they're not 90, but geez, they're not cheap at 60 grand. And unless you're playing for Coach Franklin, okay, you're not getting money. These guys just do not give money. So if you have a brilliant kid, maybe you get a little bit in merit-based scholarships. But as you can see, as we're projecting here, of all the schools we've talked about, right? Despite these sticker prices, it's going to be the Penn State that's going to be the most expensive school. Last thing I'll just kind of flag while I'm in here before I kick it back to Peggy. As you're building this list and kind of finalizing this list, this advanced school search is something that we like to highlight, because I can go say, you know, whatever some of your admissions criteria is, the big stuff. I can say, go show me schools that are close to my house. And I know my kid wants to be on a smaller type school and they want to major in whatever, biology. Okay. And then I can sort just based on my family's financial criteria. So if I'm not eligible for need, I can just say, go show me schools that check those boxes, but they're going to give me merit, right? So maybe I wasn't thinking about Wheaton, but if they're going to give me 40,000, we'll take a closer look. Or here's my alma mater, Stonehill. You know, maybe that wasn't one of our top schools, but if they're going to give me 32,000, let's apply, right? And if I am eligible for financial aid, I can sort just based on that, right? Nobody gets into MIT. It's impossible to get into MIT, but here's some other colleges that are really generous with financial aid that, again, maybe are a little bit more realistic from an admissions standpoint. So we'll kind of wrap it at the end here before we cut out tonight, how you can dive in here. But again, I think it's helpful to take these new terms. I think for most of you, these new terms that we're talking about, and actually show a case study and talk about the differences between need and merit and kind of some real life examples. So I appreciate all the participation. Obviously, we got a ton of schools we didn't get to, the vast majority of them, but pop them in there as you're following along here to get an idea of where your family stacks up.
All right. So we're starting to get questions about the forms, which makes sense. So let's talk about them. So basically, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of applying for financial aid and having these SAIs calculated. The schools are all different, and I've put that in a few of my answers to parents already. It's hard to say this is the way it is for your family, because literally in my family with two, same grade, doing it at the same time, could be very different realities based on the school and how they even treat this different students in the same family. So just keep that in mind. As far as forms, I'm already getting questions about, should we submit forms? We recommend almost every family submits both forms if you need to submit the CSS for some of the schools on your list. But pretty much all families submit the FAFSA. There's a whole bunch of reasons, not just Matt mentioned that some of them you need it for merit aid, which I know doesn't make sense because it's a need-based form, but be that as it may, you could be leaving money on the table. One of our other experts is the head of scholarships at University of Oklahoma. And he said a few weeks ago that they won't even look at you if you're appealing, like Matt kind of talked about earlier, if for scholarships, if you don't have the FAFSA on file. So you don't submit it because your SAI is high and you're literally leaving money on the table. So submit the FAFSA. Almost every school requires it. There's a few schools, trade schools or whatever, that maybe don't, but pretty much all the schools do. Deadlines matter. This probably isn't a shocker to any of you. The admission deadlines for applications as well as the financial aid. I was helping a family of a mom who has an older student at Southern Cal, and she said, my package changed. Can you help me? I was looking into it. I can't figure out what's going on. It should be better than it is, but I am just starting to work with this family. I asked one of our other experts who used to run financial aid at Southern Cal, and the first thing he said to me is, did she miss the deadline? Because if she did, that's why. So it is, deadlines really, really matter. So if your kids aren't so great at deadlines, this is a great time for them to develop this life skill, and you can step in and help them get better at it, right? Because pretty soon there's not going to be anybody to coach them on it. The colleges, some are good at keeping you on track, but it's not really their job. And a lot of times they will communicate with your child, not you. So again, I know my kids are older. They think email is antiquated, right? Make sure they're looking at whatever their email is that the colleges are communicating with, because you could be getting stuff that's really important to stay on top of. All right, so let's talk about the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. And as I said, most colleges only require this form to get federal help, state help, but also to give out their endowment money. And the endowment money is what you're looking for. That is the biggest discount to the cost of attendance. The FAFSA usually goes live October 1. This year, because of the upcoming FAFSA changes that Matt's going to talk about in a few minutes, it's going live in December. That's all we know. The Department of Ed is saying December. We don't know the date. The minute we do, we will shoot it out to everybody and you'll see, right? But you just got to take a deep breath and wait. There's nothing you can do. But that's just for this year. We'll go back to October 1 next year. A prior year we already talked about, so that means a 2-year look back. If you were divorced or separated, I had a few questions on this in the Q&A. Only the custodial parent submits the FAFSA. The custodial parent is defined as the parent that provides the most financial support on a year look back from when you're submitting that form. Not last year, not what's in an agreement, none of that. It's literally a year look back. So this gives you some wiggle room to be honest, but maybe to strategize around, hey, it's pretty close as far as how much we support our child. Let's try and get the parent that's more advantageous to submit the FAFSA to be the custodial parent while still being honest. And just because you're receiving child support does not mean that your ex is providing more support. You want to think strategically here. If you have a mortgage and your child spends the most time with you, and there's 3 in the household, you divide that by 3. That's part of your support for your child. So I'm trying to plant the seed of think creatively here. You're not going to lie, but think creatively and strategize about who the custodial parent is. That other parent doesn't submit the FAFSA in any way, shape, or form. One thing, if you have a senior right now that you should and can do, is get what's called a FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. You're going to need it to e-sign the form. If you're married, one parent needs it, but the Department of Ed is recommending you both get it in case when you get in there, it doesn't accept one, then you can go and, technology is never seamless, right? And there's some big changes happening this year, so that's going to be a little bit more challenging as well. And your child needs it. That's the way you're going to log into the FAFSA. So when it goes live, if you don't have that, you can't get going. So go ahead and get that now. The government approves you that you are they confirm you are who you are, and you're good to go. So go ahead and do that. Save that somewhere, that username and password, because you're going to need it every year when you submit the FAFSA. In December, or whenever the FAFSA goes live, sometime in December, we will be doing a line by line. So I'm not going to go over all of this slide. The bullet in blue, number 5, I'll just talk about it. And I think I mentioned this when I first started talking in the beginning. The SAI is not necessarily what you're going to pay, and it's not going to be a penny more. That's not necessarily the case. So you have to understand this. Understand what the college is going to expect you to pay. That's just the tipping point, or the tip of the iceberg that they use to start figuring it out. Okay. We're going to get in the weeds on all of these things of don't do's on the FAFSA when the forms actually go live. All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt, just to talk about these changes, and then I'll talk about the CSS profile, the second form.
Awesome. And just 2 things I'll hit on because we got kind of some repeat or similar questions. One of them is, if we know we're not eligible for need-based aid, but we still see the value in completing the FAFSA on the CSS profile, and it asks us on the Common App, are you going to be applying? What do we do? And in that case, you can have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that you can say, no, we're not applying for need-based aid. Now, by saying that, you're telling every college you're not going to even throw your hat in the ring for any need-based financial aid. So you are committing to that. But you can still do the FAFSA and CSS profile for a couple of the reasons we mentioned, obviously the big one being the scholarships. The other one, and this is something that I think is just a nice perk to families that fit into that category. If you do the FAFSA each year, the student becomes entitled to borrow a little bit through the federal government direct student loan program. We have all of our clients do this for 1 of 2 reasons. Number 1, if you want your kids to have any skin in the game, this is the best place to do it. Lowest fixed interest rate. They don't need a cosigner. They don't need established credit. They're guaranteed to get it if they jump through the easy hoops in order to qualify for that, right? So if you want them to have skin in the game, best place to do it. Let's say you don't, and you have the resources where you say, I don't need my kid to borrow. I don't want my kid to borrow. Okay, and I'm philosophically opposed to it. Okay, great. I still have families do this, take out the loan each year in the student's name, pay it off instantly on their behalf before any interest rates accrue. You do that each year, and now they graduate with established credit, right? The long and the short of it is, and I say this all the time, you're going to have to talk me out of why it's not a good idea to take advantage of that program for one reason or the other. Okay, so let's talk about these FAFSA changes. You guys, you class of 2024, you guys are the guinea pigs. There's some massive ones. Again, Peg and I have been doing this combined almost 40 years here. We've never had a year like this, right? It's not uncommon that there's some changes and ebbs and flows in this whole thing. 2000, you all are kind of blowing the top off in terms of major changes. So let's talk about some of them. I'll start with the good news, right? Let's go down to number 5, and I've answered some questions that fits, excuse me, in this bucket somewhere. Families that need the most help are getting more help, right? Full stop. I think we're universally stoked about that. So families that have the least amount of resources, the lowest income, there's going to be more money. It's going to be easier to qualify for, both in terms of the thresholds and also actually just navigating the process, right? They've made the FAFSA form, knock on wood here, coming out supposedly sometime in December, easier to navigate, right? So that's going to help a lot of families that struggle with English as a language barrier, or maybe a lot of students that don't have a lot of help at home, and they got to navigate this as 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Okay, so we're stoked about that. Okay, so that's one of the big wins here. Another win is the fact that in 6 and 7 here is that Peg hit on this earlier. They're not going to hold our 529 balances in our younger kids' name against us, which is beautiful, right? That was a very unfair rule. So we're not going to get punished for that anymore. They're also not going to punish us. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but they're not going to hold it against us for contributing towards our 401ks or our 403bs. That's not going to be added back and treated as untaxed income anymore. So that's a big win. So 4, 5, or 5, 6, 7, we're totally juiced about that. Okay. The problem is that there's going to be some other families that are essentially going to be funding those programs. It's not going to be the Department of Education. The biggest one, or the 3 big ones I have up here, right? 2 household families, divorced, separated families. Now the family that they want to complete the FAFSA, the household that they want to complete the FAFSA, and 2 household families or split households, okay, is the parent that provides, or the household that provides, the most financial support to the student. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb here to say that their theory is that usually that's going to be the family with the household with the higher income, more resources, the one that's going to give you a higher SAI, and therefore we have to give you less need-based financial aid. Okay. I think that's the theory there. But I'm seeing this really now as an opportunity. So be smart here, guys. Okay, read in between the lines a little bit. You don't even need to read between the lines too much. If you are a 2 household family, you want the household that has the least amount of income and assets to be the one that completes the FAFSA. And you have some control here, right? Because you guys are both oftentimes in some capacity, right? Of course, not always, but in some capacity, providing financial support to the student. You have time. You have a couple months to see to it that the books kind of work in your favor, and you can reasonably defend being the parent with the least amount of income and assets to be the one that provides the most financial support to the student. So be smart. This is an opportunity here that we're kind of we want to make sure that people get this right here. This is another one where we're like, talk to us if you fit in this category somewhere. Another one that is tough to spin a positive on is families with multiple kids in college at once. Okay. So it used to be, as it should be, in my opinion, if you had more than one kid in school at once, the formula accounted for that. So, and effectively your SAI would be split in half, and half for each student. If you had twins like Peggy, or even if you were, a couple years apart, but you were both in school at once, that's going away. They're not giving you a break if you have more than one kid in college at once. So effectively, for a meaningful percentage of families, it's not every college, but for a meaningful percentage of families, the cost of college is going to double if we have more than one kid that's going to be in school. So that one, again, is really tough, in my opinion, to find much of a silver lining on. And then the last one, and again, I don't see a lot of silver lining here, business owners. It used to be if you had less than 100, if you had more than 100 employees, you didn't have to put anything about your business on the FAFSA. Not the net worth, not the valuation, not what you had in your checking and your savings account, anything under that business umbrella, real estate, keep it off the FAFSA. Okay. That's gone away. So now there's no, even if you're a sole proprietor and it's just you, they want that on the FAFSA, right? So again, this one is people are going to step on a lot of landmines here. So again, that's where we're like, please talk to us or someone before you complete that FAFSA and hit send, because too many people are going to overvalue themselves and their business. Do not be afraid. Again, we can't give blanket recommendations here, but a lot of the people I talk to, especially sole proprietors, I say, if you don't show up to work tomorrow, what's your business worth? And the answer is usually, or oftentimes, is nothing. Great. Don't be afraid to put that on the FAFSA. Okay. Not everybody can say that. And it's not always that simple, of course. But I think for some of you business owners hearing this, you can probably see the challenge there. And it really matters what we do here in terms of financial aid eligibility. So those are the biggies, Peggy. I know we're
All right, let me just finish
and
up
I know,
my
guys,
question.
sorry, we're getting a lot of questions on what do you guys do? How do you work with us, et cetera, right? By and large tonight, we just got to educate folks on how this works, talk less about kind of what we do, but I will kind of tease at the end, how families can interface with us and give you at least a brief overview of what we do. And if you want to learn more, you can let us know, but we'll get to those at the end.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few minutes. So the second financial aid form is called the CSS profile. So I would guess that your kids, all of you on this webinar, you probably have at least one school on your list, or your child does, that requires this form. So this is not replacing the FAFSA, it's along with the FAFSA. So what these schools do is they get the CSS profile, and you're actually going to have 2 SAIs. And you saw that when Matt showed you the sample family. There was a federal SAI from the FAFSA, and then there's an institutional SAI that comes from the CSS profile. So most of the schools that require this are private. There's a few publics, Michigan, UNC, Chapel Hill, UVA, and William and Mary. The rest of them are private. So the key differences here, and I touched on this second bullet at the beginning, is the home you live in will be asked about. So they're going to ask, what's the market value? What did you buy it for? When did you buy it? What are your liabilities on the home? That's where we don't want to overvalue, which is what I talked about earlier. You want to be honest, but don't overvalue and then take off that IRS quick sale. Some schools don't look at home equity, like at Stanford. They just have the philosophy of, hey, we don't expect parents to tap their equity. That's really big of them. I say sarcastically. They should all be saying that, but Stanford nicely does. That's part of these planning opportunities and what you can see when you create your free account. So that's your primary home equity. For divorced and separated families, remember with the FAFSA, only the non-custodial parent is submitting. With the CSS, both parents are going to submit. The custodial parent submits with the student. The non-custodial parent submits the non-custodial CSS profile. They both go to College Board, which is the nonprofit that manages the CSS. Your kids have a login if they have APs, SAT, PSAT, that's all College Board. The privacy is maintained. The colleges get that information and they do their proprietary number crunching and they come up with that second SAI. They use that number in the cost of attendance minus SAI equals need to decide how they're going to give out their endowment money. Typically, well, usually before these FAFSA changes, that number was usually higher, especially if people were homeowners, because that equity is thrown in there. But now with some of the changes Matt was talking about, we're seeing it change a little bit. And the business owners, they've always been on the table. There's been no exclusion for small business. Now there isn't on the FAFSA side. That makes them more even Steven, basically. And just to warn you, the CSS is much longer. So the CSS is live right now. It's supposed to go live October 1. It went live a little early. It tends to every year. I will be shooting a line by line. We will be showing up again with webinars for you on this, but it's triply as long, if not more, now with the FAFSA changes. So just keep that in mind. It's they pretty much ask you everything, but just like the FAFSA, there's right ways to submit this form and ways that are more challenging. Again, we're going to go through this in detail when we talk about the forms, but key things to keep in mind here are if the question is not required, don't answer it, right? And just watch my line by line. Honestly, no deadlines are tomorrow. I will shoot that puppy this week and watch it. And then, you know, if you want a set of eyes, you can book time with us. And Matt's going to talk about that in a few minutes. Number 4 here, there is a question that every parent says, how do I fill this out? It says, what is your parent going to be paying for this school year? You don't want to overestimate this number. A lot of people take their 529 balance and divide it by 4. You want to have a good idea what your institutional SAI is and your federal, because if the school thinks you can afford 40 and you put 50 there, they're going to say, great, now we expect them to pay 50. So be really careful how you fill out that question. So that's the CSS. Matt's going to touch on appealing for a few minutes. This is a biggie, and usually I don't even like talking about this, but because, you know, Matt talked about the 2 kids in school rule, the colleges will know that you have more than 1 child in school. It is going to be a question on the updated FAFSA, and the colleges, when they figure out how to spend their endowment money, they can take that into account. They can't for federal money, but they might not. They very well could not. That's another thing to appeal on. So I'll let Matt, look at that segue again. I'll let Matt talk about appeals. You got a minute, buddy.
Yeah, and we got a lot of questions when things change. What about my income in 2023 is totally different than 22? I got a bunch of those. This is where this comes into play, right? And this is where it's like, here's the takeaway now, guys. Like Peg said, I said, we're going to continue to educate you kind of in real time throughout this process. The headline here for today is we just want to have this mindset that we're not going to accept that first offer or financial offer that we get from these colleges. And there's a method to the madness in terms of how we go back and do better than that first process. Again, it's something that we pride ourselves on and have a great track record with. The only thing we can do with it now is, number one, just kind of get our story ready. And you guys have talked about that already without sharing it with the colleges. That's important. And then the other one is applying to these competing schools, right? Making sure that we have leverage in a negotiating chip or chips on our list. So yeah, that's kind of all. I don't want to go much further than that today when we talk about appeals.
All right.
Okay, so.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Yeah. So so a couple things that I want to just kind of cover here, because again, we got a meaningful amount of questions. So a few things. The first one is, some folks asked about, well, for the software, everybody's on the free version. If we want to upgrade to all the bells and whistles, couple things to talk about here, right? The first way to do that is if you just wanted to use the software where you can have an unlimited number of colleges to put in here, and you want to have access to that advanced search, etc. And Peg can put this landing page if you have it, Peg, in the chat here. Sure. But you have it's $127 for the year, and we have a Bergen 15 coupon code if you wanted to upgrade for just the software. If you, and I think there's a few families that might fit in this category here, if you can't afford that, just write into us, okay? Write into support@collegeaidpro.com. You say, I went to the presentation last night, I saw Matt and Peg, and Matt said if we couldn't afford the $127 to let us know, and we'll get you on there for free. We don't vet that. We don't, we're not going to check anything, and our team will show you how to get access to the full version of the platform without having to pay the $127. I mean, obviously we ask that you take us at face value there, or whatever, that you're honest there, because we will take you at face value. So anyways, we trust you. If you're somebody that says, hey, I am a DIYer, right? But I would like to just have somebody gut check this thing. I want to spend an hour with somebody to ask my particular questions about my business, about my divorce situation, about my whatever. I want someone to double check my CSS profile before I hit submit, or before I go ED, whatever you can upgrade it. This is right within your accounts here. You can say this, talk to an expert, upgrade, and you can choose the software plus and where do we go here? The software plus I'm in here somewhere, Peg. There we go. Premium plus expert, right? And then you can have an hour to meet again with anyone on our team at any time over the next year, if you choose that option. So I always say, if you're a DIYer, do something, right? Just stay engaged with us, continue to pay attention to the education. If you want to upgrade, great. That's what it looks like. For a percentage of families, we just know they just kind of want more hand-holding than that. Our comprehensive services, we have our cute little name here, Wake Me Up When It's Over packages, obviously a completely different price point, and that's not for everybody, and it's kind of a again, we're only talking to some folks that might even consider that, but it is something we offer for families that just want that more comprehensive help. If you want to I just put a link in the chat. If you want to talk to somebody on our team, actually, we should do the poll, Peggy.
Yeah, I was just about to interrupt you. So let me launch the poll. If you'd like us to send you more information, I'm going to launch it right now. Just go ahead and pick yes or no there, and we're happy to send you out some information. But as Matt said, the key thing here is we've got different ways to support you. Whatever the way is, just keep the ball rolling. It's so easy to, this was great, I learned so much, and then you go put it in a pile on your desk. The recording comes, you don't have time to watch it. I get all that. We're all super busy, but stay engaged in some way, because if your child isn't a senior, your child's going to be a senior at some point, and you're going to have to deal with this. And the sooner you understand it, where you can really help your child, keep affordability as part of the conversation. If you understand it and you're married, you can sit down, the two of you, and figure out what that means for you between the two of you, and then you can talk to your child. And I did that with my two, and had the conversation of, hey, this school's 70,000 more tail end of senior year. You like both of these schools. To my son, you need to go here. And he just said, okay, because we had laid the groundwork, right? We had done the homework. We had figured out where we were. And as Matt said, we can help you with that homework. We can pretty much do your homework, or if you're a person that wants to do your homework, you can do it yourself, and just stay engaged with us in the community, because we'll provide
the last thing I'll say, if anybody does want to chat on the or learn more, I would recommend you book your time tonight, because we go up in prices October 1st, our kind of seasonal rush delivery prices. So if that's something you want to do, just book a time. Make sure you talk to somebody this week before that happens this weekend. And then, the other thing here is, let me just share one other thing, because a bunch of people were upset, and I don't blame them, about that ridiculous FAFSA change about, the sibling discount. We've been beating that drum for a long time. We started a petition to try to stop it. Well, it's not letting me grab it right now, but if you just Google FAFSA petition,
well, it's change.org, and if you Google, and then if you put FAFSA in there, you'll see Matt, and that's the petition, and you can go ahead and sign it. But also, I'll say again what I said when I was on the webinar with Federal Student Aid. They were like, yes, that's how they have to give out federal money. But when it comes to their endowment money, there's wiggle room. So that's where that appealing and getting some professional help on how to do that, and to look at the award and see what the school is doing. They might follow the rules, but then on appeal, they will be allowed to, it's called professional judgment. That's what we call it in the industry. They can go in and recalculate an SAI for their school. And then, no promises, but that could change your financial situation quite a bit. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and obviously, you guys, awesome questions tonight. Really appreciate it. We don't have the opportunity to get to every single one. I think we got to quite a bit here. It looks like about 100, Peggy. We did pretty good. But like I said, we're not going anywhere, right? You know, this is what we do all day, every day. Continue to follow along with us in whatever capacity works best for you. If anybody else kind of on the school counselor front wants to say any parting words, you can jump on here. Otherwise, I think we'll probably say goodnight, and everybody will get the recording tomorrow. So everybody that's registered, you'll have the recording, and anybody that said, yeah, we want to hear from you guys, will you'll hear
And the
from us.
recording has us. It's not just audio, so you'll be able to see the slides. Somebody asked me that.
But just another word of thanks. I mean, we have nothing to add. We defer to you for your expertise and wisdom, and this is what you do all day. So that's why we like to bring you in. We get educated along the way ourselves every time. I think Mike would agree.
Yeah, we really appreciate the time and the information you guys are offering to our families and our community.
Always a
Invaluable.
pleasure. One of these days, maybe, Matthew, back on premise, you know, one of these days.
We may do that. People do like to see some people in person, but this has been a nice way to get people from a larger area, including Seattle in this case. So thank you for being with us, Peg.
Of course, I say that now. When push comes to shove, I'll be like, Matthew, come on, let's just do this thing right.
He'll back out, trust me.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll have
All
a
right,
great night.